Thank you all for coming today. It's a very important topic and I'm really happy that we can talk about it. So up there on the slide you've got us in a completely non-across order. I'm Steve D. Just do a quick introduction. I have worked in the tabletop industry for about 20 years and I'm also the founder of The Message, which is a social group designed to encourage gamer men to be less douchey about gamer women, effectively. To stand up and sort of say that if not on our watch are we going to let this hobby be so hostile. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Emre, Deniz. I am the director of X Space. We do virtual reality games and enterprise stuff, and we collaborate and work with NASA and a bunch of other partners. I just want to say that message sounds really, really awesome. I am a firm believer that pretty firm believer that it's up to especially cis straight men to change our spaces and to make the difference that we need to, as opposed to essentially relying on the emotional labour and general labour of everybody else to clean up our space for ourselves. So this sounds like it's a really cool thing.
Hi, I'm Flores, professional speaker and contributor and artist for a journalism site based off of the Philippines called philscottgame.org, so you'll continue to buy there occasionally. Off that, I am a freelance artist, occasionally do for money. I am non-binary, so I suppose the effects of conceptions of masculinity and affecting me in, I suppose, a way from an outsider's perspective, so I think that helps clear up some sort of help contribute to a dialogue to go on with what happens in a lot of the game.
And I'm Olivia. I actually did my thesis on sort of hegemonic masculinities and the ways that they intersect with the gay community. So it's nice to see that I can actually do something with that thesis. Other than that, big member of the city nerd scene, and I've spoken at PAX and so excited about that.
Fantastic. Keep the questions going around. That's what I was going to say is that there is no stupid question here, because we really want to make sure that everyone understands the background about these issues. And one of the goals of this panel is to try and talk about the things that before they cause the problems. This sort of analogy we're talking about. We're going to take as read for this panel that there is a problem with masculinity in gaming. We're going to make that. We're not going to debate whether there is. And the question is to look at why that is, but also to look at what we can do to stop it before it becomes a problem. So we've got some base rules that we're going to just obviously have. We don't want any sexism, cis-sexism or homophobia. Things that we're taking in red, no anti-feminism, and that Gamergate and MRAs and red pillars are hate groups that are also against men. And we can talk about that, but that is something I'm going to start with as a base principle. But the next point is we also want this to be a place where we can talk about some of the questions people have, because what's going on at the moment is that, to my belief anyway, that men have been kind of dumped into a situation that is very toxic and very confusing and has a lot of very extremely sharply defined rules for them, and they're not sure what to do with that information. They often make mistakes. They are told they're doing the wrong thing, but not always told how to make it better. And then someone comes along, a red pillar or an MRA, and says, no, you didn't make a mistake at all. It's just that women are bitches. And we have the real truth. And we want to stop men going down that path, rather than trying to bring them out of it, is the idea. That's one of our goals here today. But we're also going to talk about gaming in general. That first point, though, is very important, as well as a grounding principle, is that there is no one way to be masculine. And that, I think, is also one of the problems you can see immediately with men's rights activists. That's what MRA stands for, by the way. It's the men's rights activists, who are a group of anti-feminists who believe that men are terribly oppressed.
yeah, the oppressors of men as well, so that's the kind of irony there.
Yes. And they very much have very, 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 very fixed views of masculinity, which is generally how I tell you. If anyone starts telling you this is the way to be a man, that's when you know that they're lying. One thing I also want to talk is a story I read very recently is about, I'm sure you all know, most of you know how to play chess. There's a piece called The Queen, who was very powerful. Queen did not already exist in chess. She was added to speed the game up because people thought it was too boring. She was added in the 15th century, and it was originally called Queen's Chess because it had this new piece in it, or sometimes Drunk Queen's Chess because she could move so far. According to the article I was reading, that there was a huge shockwave, particularly through Spain and southern Europe when this happened. There were brawls, there were punch-ups, there were men swearing they would never play chess again, and there were even attacks on women, just because gaming and masculinity and toxic masculinity had intersected again. So this is nothing new. This has been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years, and yeah, what we might do then is just, do you guys want to add anything to this point about your experiences with toxic masculinity in gaming and game design?
Oh yeah, easily. I mean, the expectation, and I mean, I come from a background where I've been leading teams and working as an employer, and one of the biggest things that we've had happen was understanding how implicitly there's a lot of microaggressions that we engage in, specifically things about what we believe is supposed to be like being assertive, taking control, taking command, and doing a lot of toxic things that I don't think that people realize is quite toxic, and not realizing that good leadership, as we have defined it as men, are very toxic masculine kind of qualities. And I think my experiences have been generally about realigning what it means to not just be a game designer, but also be a business operator or someone who engages in employing people and directing people, and understanding that yelling at people or essentially telling people what to do or not listening to people's kind of emotional things. It's been a long journey, but I feel like that it's a huge thing that happens from the toxicity that we don't often talk about in games, is that there's a huge, I guess, another economy in games, not just like art, programming, or game, but about how these businesses are established. And they're very much based upon enforcing very toxic masculine ways as paths to success, and about changing those attitudes as well.
I think it's probably worth noting also that the theory of toxic masculinity, because I don't want to assume that everyone knows what that is, and then alienate people, it's not so much talking about, men are toxic, men are bad. It's talking about the cultural ways that we expect men to behave and perform masculinity is toxic. It's ending up in terrible mental health for men. It's ending up in the abuse of women. And so I just wanted to point out that it's not so much, I don't know, when I get told that I've done something wrong, I bridle at it. So hearing the phrase toxic masculinity and perhaps not realising that it's not saying men are bad, it's the ways that we expect men to behave is bad. Just thought it was worth clearing that up, because I would be bridling if I hadn't heard it before.
Yeah, that was one of the first questions we got was, what's the definition of toxic masculinity?
Yeah.
Did that clear it up? Is everyone... Where's it go?
I can even do some examples, like, boys don't cry, toughen up, harden up, don't show emotion, yell to get your way, be assertive to do, to get what you want. The fact that MRAs and people who are especially anti-feminists use essentially terminology and slurs that target the behavior that they feel as though is not masculine shows you that toxic masculinity is a really defining part of how we as men are not, like we don't have a good healthy environment right now. The fact that we get called names that specifically target things such as being weak or acting like a woman or acting like anything else other than this general male hero perception of men is toxic masculinity.
There was sort of an idea that I've been very briefly read about, but was thought on more. Has anyone ever heard of Panellists? Mm-hmm. Yeah. The thing where there's a watchtower in the middle, the guards, and all the prison cells around it. So because the idea of the panopticon is that the central tower is basically one the see-through glass. Like, they can look out and no one can look in. So at any given point, all those prisoners essentially self-releasing or basically work under the guide, like operate under the assumption that they're always being watched. And so not only do they self-release, but they police others. And from what I've read and sort of helping me sort of understand masculinity in a sense, is a large amount of what contributes to the toxicity of our conception of masculinity is this sort of amorphous idea of, exactly how you said, all this toxicity about be a man, don't ever ask for help, be assertive, and to almost really extreme measures. And basically, the way that gaming culture ends up co-opting that sort of idea is basically through exactly the slurs being thrown around in competitive games. And just because this is the first thing off the top of my head, Overwatch. I mean, if you've not just Overwatch, any competitive game where you've had sort of, have any sort of conversation or talk to any of your teammates or opposing teams, there will almost always be some sort of slur that gets bounced back and forth. And it just sort of helps perpetuate this self-policing of what constitutes masculinity that, not only, it sort of carries over from this idea that, because games are for guys and, that conversation. But at the same time, it also perpetuates the fact that there's that ideal of what masculinity in gaming should be, and then having all this toxicity happen to keep perpetuating that. Just from personal perspective as well, it sort of leaks over from, like I said, when I play Overwatch as well, it's ridiculous the amount of times and it's the main reason I avoid playing Overwatch on the PC, if only because there's no chat option on the PS4. And so in the end, and that shows enough that, not just me as a non-binary person, but any other person, even masculine inclined, may or may not sort of like that environment and end up moving from PS4, which can hurt sort of development and people who want to fix that environment in PC Overwatch. But anyway, I digress. So yeah, and basically the point of my fact is I feel like a lot of masculinity, or at least conceptions of it now, is very highly performative. And
yeah.
Absolutely.
Picking up on that, I think the main takeaway from the concept of the panopticon, I think I'd be able to say that, I did 4 years worth of gender studies, is that it's largely self-policing. And once you kind of come to realise gender isn't real, we're policing this concept all on our own. I think the main takeaway from that is obviously, if the panopticon is self-policing and the panopticon works on fear, if you can sort of throw caution to the wind and start performing masculinity however you want, then we can sort of start to break away from these toxic masculinities, from these hegemonic masculinities, stop competing with each other, and accept that masculinity can be performed in any way we like.
And it's also worth noting, given the nature of this column, that toxic masculinity overlaps very strongly with heterosexuality. I remember very clearly one of the first times I went into back in the day when people would go to cafes to play computer games, so network cafes. Not so very common these days, because they were the only places that had good enough connections and stuff. I walked in one time, there's a whole bunch of kids, probably early high school playing, and I heard someone yell up from the back, "Oh, I found him, he's in the gayest part of the map." So just the essential unmanliness, of course, of being associated with being homosexual, which of course was what I grew up with, particularly in my school years. It was an extremely policed masculine environment, and the worst thing you could be was homosexual. So that's one of the ways that toxic masculinity just reaches into every other part of society and stuff. So we're going to just quickly look at things that gaming does that make that gaming, I believe, particularly in recent times, gaming has become more and more popular and more hyper-marketed. And marketing is not something that is very subtle. It tends to play on our biggest cultural myths, because that's the easiest way to attack us. So a combination of the spread of gaming, the advertising of gaming, and the commercialising of gaming, but also there are things in gaming itself that make us particularly vulnerable to these kind of things. So we've just got a few of them there. Hyper-competitiveness is, of course, one of them. And again, there's nothing wrong with being competitive and playing competitive games, but there's a tendency for that to become toxic. And we have whole cultures built around proving your excellence at games, and they very much play on masculine concepts. And games also games provide an environment where social cues stop existing, and you can do things that you can't do outside of games. So they encourage things like backstabbing, beating your friends, slaving people off, smack talk as being acceptable, and a lot of people carry those things back into society, and they see the world as a game, and they see the world as trying to hack a game. And one of the questions we've got is that are there ways that, are we always going to see this? If gaming brings out hyper-competitiveness and tends to always involve some sort of violence, and falls into our broad cultural stereotypes, is it always going to be a danger area for toxic masculinity? What do you guys think?
I think a particularly helpful concept is this concept E. Sedgwick coined about literature, actually, called chromosociality. And it talks about the ways in which men specifically interact with each other. And there's a couple of main elements of that interaction, one being competitiveness, one being assumed heterosexuality, and the other being sort of the sexualization of women. And, you know, none of those things on their own are necessarily bad, but largely if men are expected to interact in those ways, then there can be that iteration of toxic masculinity. So I think, in answer to the question, we're not necessarily always going to see that kind of behaviour. It's not impossible to have a gaming community without these things. I think it's just that we need to change the cultural cues around competitiveness, around hypersexualization, and around heterosexuality. Heterosexuality doesn't have to be the only thing, but it also isn't wrong. Sexualization isn't bad, but if the only women that exist are sexualized, that's a problem. Competitiveness on its own isn't a bad thing, but when it's considered in most people's minds as the only way to express masculinity, the only way to be a good man is to be the best, then you've got an issue, because then it's tied so intrinsically to who you are as a person.
I agree. I mean, one of the big problems is the fact that the way that we make and develop video games means that men are power fantasies and women are sex objects more often than not. That in itself is a very hetero kind of concept, and it targets a very specific audience. But it also means that that audience believes that they are inherently entitled and privileged to enjoy that piece of media, which is why we get such bad pushback whenever you have an inclusive or diverse or intersectional kind of cast. We saw that even with the most obscure things when, you know, they defined Tracy's sexuality and people came out saying, you ruined my, what was it, what's the word for it? How stupid is that? Like, how do we get to the point where the toxicity in being a man got to the point where you feel ownership over a digital character and you're offended that they change her sexuality? Like, that is, so competitiveness and things like that, that is, like, the way that those things are happening is a symptom of a very large issue that we have in how we create media for consumption and how we market that to a specific demographic and then tell that demographic that they are entitled to that media as well. Because women can be, you know, competitive and as competitive as men can be, sure, but we don't make them the media to do that, to explore even those things.
Yeah, it's the combination of the base culture of already masculinity defined as being owning women, and then that hits gaming and becomes, goes off into a nuclear explosion. And yeah, in the head of the person that's going on is that they believe that they have a expectation that this woman character is there for their consumption, and if you take that away, it feels like a loss. It's like you go to your favourite shop and they don't have your favourite burger anymore. And you're like, what? Because in their mind, something's been taken from them. There's a very good question that gets into a personal thing here that someone's just sent through, which is, have you had any personal experience of your family where you've been told to man up or be a man, or other ways been subject to this kind of social stereotyping? Absolutely. I'm trying to think if there's not particularly ones that jump to mind in my family, but I was certainly, my father was certainly very bad at expressing emotion and still is. Actually, just a few years ago, my nephew was having a lot of trouble riding his new bike, my father's grandson, and started to get the feeling that he was a complete failure because of this, started to cry, and my grandfather just took the bike off him and said he was being silly, and my grandfather rode home with both bikes and left them on the side of the road. And it wasn't hostile, it's just like he had no process to deal with that emotion. He has no physical structures in his brain to understand how to deal with emotion because he was never taught it. And that's my parents' generation, and we are just starting to turn the corner on that. Certainly, and there's there are personal anecdotes as well, but that one just sprung to my mind. What about you guys? Have you seen personal examples? Have you experienced something that sticks in your mind?
I mean, I don't identify as male, yeah, but one thing that I did find when I was first getting into the gaming community again, because I sort of stopped in high school because it wasn't cool. I cared so much about what people thought about me in high school. But I started to pick up towards the end, and one thing I found before I found feminism was the best way to get in with the gaming community was to be like, oh, chicks, am I right? I love them boobies, you know? So it's not so much for me in being told you have to be a man, but very much in replicating aspects that I considered manly and being like, I'm not like other girls was what I found a very easy way to get into the community.
Yeah. The sort of off the strain of not like other girls thing. Just generally when the trait of, as I've already mentioned before, PC Overwatch is largely toxic because of what happens in chat. So I end up going to PS4, but unfortunately to have some sort of team cohesion, because it's a team game, you more often than not have to go on voice chat to try and at least do some modicum of teamwork. And my voice isn't exactly typically male, or it's not like that nice level enough to be androgynous or whatever. But whenever I speak, it is almost always assumed I am some sort of underage boy. And they will tell me, isn't it, school already? Isn't school holidays over? And it's like, no, I'm a 25-year-old human being. Can you please just get on the goddamn payload? But, and that stuff, it's a very daily thing, and it's learned to become like a bit of a white noise, but because masculinity is not always essentially part of my identity, a lot of the toxicity that I do experience is more through, as a personal anecdote, just through more my father. Now, I'm not sure how many of you may or may be in the sort of a more nuclear family, but generally, as a father, you end up being expected to be the breadwinner, the assertive one, the one who makes the rules, the one who brings home the bacon or bread, or whatever that saying is. And for whatever reason, however life has made my father, he is not quite exactly that man. He does work, he does bring home money. However, his masculinity is almost always challenged by his environment, let's just politely say it. And it reflects, to me, because it's been such an ongoing example as I grew up with my father, it's given me such a weird, almost unsympathetic view to men, and it sort of contributed a lot to how I ended up, sadly, sometimes contribute to how toxified the masculinity around me, and my male friends, in my co-workers and the like. And again, it's been a long journey to unlearn some of those things so that men can, in their own right, become themselves without this sort of toxicity, ruining not just them, but the large community as a whole, especially in gaming circles. So yeah, those are the two experiences personally as regards to toxic masculinity.
Well, I was a nightclub bouncer for 7 years, and I come from the Middle East, so got that down pat. But yeah, if you wanted experiences, I'll have a list in the back on that.
So we got a question. Gaming has never solely belonged to cis straight white men. So where did the idea come from that it belonged to men? Generally, the answer can be found in marketing, I believe. Up until about 1984 or 85, gaming and toys in general was relatively non-gendered. There were Barbie dolls, of course, and there was a general assumption that girls would play with dolls. But then in the 80s, they changed rules, particularly in America, about what you could show on TV and what you could advertise on TV. And that meant you could sell toys directly to children, which beforehand was never done. It was considered immoral to advertise directly to children because they weren't old enough to handle it. And at that point, they began selling a lot of parts of nerd culture, like He-Man and animation, and computers began to target specifically boys aged between about 10 and 15. And that was about 30 years ago, and would you agree with that? That would be... It's been a marketing issue ever since. Marketing is a very powerful concoction and it feeds itself. The more it creates this market, the more it needs to keep creating the market. If you constantly tell people that your product is for young boys, then the young boys become your market, so you have to keep aiming at young boys. And so it's actually only recently with the totality of computer games, I believe that we've reached a saturation point now that the clash has appeared between the advertising and the reality.
Let's not also forget about the creation of the internet and how big an influence that has been. MMORPGs are one of the biggest and the first gaming communities that grew up, and it's been a process of delineation from then ever since. Women that were on chats were constantly, no, you're not a woman, women can use the internet. Well, obviously we do, and that's no longer a thing that people say. There's still that assumption of, well, you might use the internet, but you definitely don't play online. So it's been that process forever.
But now you're not a real gamer. Yeah, so
I am a fake gamer.
Boyfriend's console.
It's true.
So that's the depth of our entitlement, is the fact that we think that, like, fine, we don't own the internet. Fine, we don't own World of Warcraft. Fine, we don't own gaming. But we just keep getting, this thing is progressing. But because of the internet, the harassment and the price that women and minorities have to pay is even greater. Because now we have this great invention where we can use social media to brigade and destroy the lives of people who, it's not just a brawl over the Queen now. It's like a targeted 5,000 person attack against someone who wrote an article about why we should have an inclusive character in the game. So I'm not sure if we're making progress, but the stakes are definitely getting higher as well.
I mean, but you can understand it though. Like it comes back to the analogy that Steve had about going to a shop and finding out that they don't sell your favourite burger anymore. Like, if you have been suckered into this toxic masculinity and you have built your entire identity about being a gamer and a gamer guy, and well, that's the reason I can't get girls because girls don't game and I game, then to be told no, actually you're ignoring women or you're attacking women by being in this state, then you can understand why you would bridle against that. Like as much as I love to laugh at MMRAs, I think when we're talking about identity and we're talking about gender identity, that's something that's very close to home to a lot of people, and if that's what you've built yourself around, it's going to be hard to break that down.
Yeah, of course, because they're role models. I mean, when we're marketing to young boys and men, we make role models that they identify with, and then when we start taking those away, we're also taking away what they felt they were entitled to, but also I understand that men's rights activists say that this is a threat on masculinity, and it's a threat against a monopoly that we once owned, and they use that as a vehicle for essentially cultivating support, because it has become a political thing for them. It has become a part of their life that they define as being any type of discourse as erosion from their right to claim that they are being threatened and attacked. So then progression seems like a validation of their claims.
Yeah, and it is a kind of cult. It's very much a kind of cult, which means it works on fear. And it works on the fear that already exists in masculinity. Someone's sent the question, why is toxic masculinity simultaneously an image of alphaness, yet is also fragile? And it is in the sense that it itself is a cult. It is a system built, like we talked about the panopticon, based on fear. If you have shown to be non-masculine, you can be put on a lower social rank. And that means you can be, in some cases, physically beaten, socially excluded, emotionally attacked. And when you live in a society where you are constantly facing that kind of scrutiny, it becomes something that is extremely about high position, but also high fear. So because any kind of attack on that will cause you to slip down an incredibly sharp surface. Any other thoughts on that, guys?
There are so many goddamn rules about being a man. Like, to the point where you have debates about, men drink coffee, women drink tea, only pussy men drink. It's a drink, right? And I think that's why it's so simultaneously so toxic to people, but so fragile, because there's like a 70-page book on what it is to be a man, and it's so easy to trot out, if you like that, you're probably gay. And that's why it's so fragile, because it's very easy to make up these rules and say that you're breaking them as a means of putting yourself up.
Yeah, and we don't get a copy of the rules. You go up going, where are these rules? Who's going to tell me? And that's one of the reasons. And again, that's one of the offers of these MRAs and red pillars, is they go, we will tell you the rules. Here they are. And if you just follow our rules, you'll be safe.
Seductive. I love rules. Like, I love me.
Yeah. That is the seduction of these things. On that topic, someone has said, what advice can you give me to talk to my anti-feminist friends? That is a huge question. That is an incredibly good question, whoever asked that. Well done, because it's very easy to go, that's too hard, and leave and go, I can't pull you out of that hell. Well done, everyone. You guys are all here. You guys have taken the step of going, I'm not going down that road. I am going to examine my masculinity and not fall into the cult, hopefully. But watching your friends go down that road and having to choose between trying to pull them out or losing a friendship or trying to tolerate a friendship, these are hard choices. Have you guys had any success or any losses of friendships?
A lot, but I would say that if you're a cis straight male, it's your job to do the labour and educate your friends, okay? We've had enough of expecting everyone else to do the labour and try to clean up the toxicity. If you're asking because you're a minority or you're a woman or you're a member of any other community or any other spectrum, then my thing to you is, I'm sorry. It's just this whole cycle of the first step of it is essentially asking people, who makes the rules or who makes the laws, who put men as the breadwinners and women as people who have to stay home and look after the children, who told men that they shouldn't talk about their emotions and caused a very high rate of suicide and depression. Women didn't do any of these things. We did this to ourselves when we said, this is how you're a man, this is how you're a cowboy, this is how you're a knight, this is how you're anything, right? This is how you're the hero of the story. So the thing I would say to your friends is, you're not an anti-feminist, you're actually anti-male. You're actively oppressing us and you are killing people by the culture that you spread. And it's on them to change, basically. But it's also on you to change your friends. Because we have to go back to our side of the fence and make those changes. Because if we don't do that, we're the ones still flinging shit back over the side, and attacking people. So it's up to us to change that. It's not enough to be, in a room full of allies and advocates and say, yeah, I'm a feminist, because you're not going back home and changing stuff with your friends. You're not going back to the pub and telling your mates, don't say slurs, don't be sexist, don't treat that person like that. So it's on us, basically. That's my advice.
Did we have a question on the back?
Was there a hands up?
No? Okay. That's my bad. I was just going to, something that's been used a lot that I think gets undervalued is the idea of calling in rather than calling out. It's very easy to call out someone and say, don't say slut, what is wrong with you? It's harder to call them in and say, well, why do you feel that way about that particular woman, and why do you think that's acceptable? So I think, whilst I thank you for putting that onus on cis straight men to do more labour, I think it is thinking about those strategies of challenging existing assumptions, and also I think examples of where women are valuable. Perhaps like the most recent example I can think of is the Star Wars controversy, and how, oh my god, a female protagonist in Star Wars, that is the worst. Sort of questioning, well, why is this so bad? Why are we having the dramas about this? Rather than being like, well, you're a sexist and I hate you for that. Calling in is always more valuable and
ask questions, don't say things.
Yeah.
For the perspective what I want to get into, I kind of want to address this as someone, not only a person of color, but also someone who's a minority, as non-binary. It's a bit idealized to think that the only people who will ever be shit to you like that, perpetuate the toxic masculinity, say the slurs, do the thing, be anti-feminists. It's a little idealized to think that there'll only ever be the cis white men in your life that will only ever say those things. But it comes down to it, sometimes really shitty things come out of other, queer people too, other people of color. People will fuck up. And sometimes when it goes on uncalled for, it ends up perpetuating itself. It becomes a cycle. It becomes a massive circle jerk of anti-feminist shit. So if, to still address that question, if you're a non-binary person of color, trying to address this within that group, props to you. That is a pretty scary thing to do, and I sympathize. But like everyone's already pretty much reiterated, question it. Put the onus on the person to question why that was their knee-jerk reaction to, oh yeah, they broke up with their boyfriend last, but they have someone new this week, and oh, what a slut. It's like, why is she a slut? She's moving on. Get over it, So, and it's just simple things like that. You don't have to sort of stand up and, call out, like just pointed out. Just question why that is, and more often than not, people will sort of stop, backpedal, or at least give them enough of a hesitation to start maybe not using that word, and their reasons are up to them as to why they would change, whether they would change their behavior, but it's just enough to start. And if there's one thing that a lot of these cons have taught me, is that a lot of these movements you do, these diversity movements that we try, starts a lot with us changing our personal circles, the people around us, our friends, our peers, sometimes even our heroes, and just little things like that, questioning that behavior and essentially trying to, free masculinity from this massive 100,000-page book that does not exist anywhere, no matter how much the MRAs may try to sell it to you, maybe try to make a lot of lives easier for people.
On this subject of men doing the work, we have a question. Oh, sorry, yes.
I've heard slut used as a derogatory term twice, and as a slut, I'm wondering why it's a derogatory term.
It has a very different tenor when it's used on a woman.
It does.
Yeah.
It has a very different tenor, but it shouldn't.
Oh, totally.
Yeah,
I consider myself to be a slut, personally.
Yeah.
All the sluts raise their hands. Yes. All the asexuals raise their hands as well, because they're awesome too. Yeah. And everyone in between.
I apologise if it came across as though I was saying that was an acceptable phrase. It was more demonstrating that that's all it gets.
Yeah, we should have clarified, but it is just parroting things we have heard at the end of these things. So.
But yeah,
That was great.
we're talking about men doing the work. One thing you automatically get accused of when you do that is white knighting.
Devious tactic.
Yes, it's a very devious tactic, and someone sort of asks, what can we do about it? Also, well, the question is, of course, sometimes you get accused of that with women as well, with men making an issue about them. So I definitely throw that over to the women. It's like, what are your thoughts on the woman, I should say, that's my fault. What are your thoughts on white knighting as a concept?
I think unfortunately, what it's doing is using a behaviour that it can be quite damaging in terms of men making an issue about them and men talking over women, and deploying that as a trolling tactic, or worse, as an MRA tactic, saying, look at these beta cucks, right?
Can we just quickly define what white knight is?
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
So, there you go.
Oh, so the theory, the suggestion is that men, in a sense, use saving women from sexism as a way of sort of perpetuating a kind of masculine standard. So here's a woman who is a damsel, in a sense, of who needs protection, but instead of needing protection from a bad man who might be beating her, is using it as a bad man who's being sexist to her. And therefore, in a sense, he's perpetuating the cycle. Here is the white knight on his steed who rides in to rescue the princess, except in this case, he's riding in to go, I am feminist and I will protect her from the bad masculinity. And therefore, you can undercut, if you're trying to talk down to feminism, you can undercut it to say, oh, you're not actually, a feminist, you're just here trying to oppress the chicks, and therefore you're just as bad as me, and things like that. Spot the troll can be hard occasionally, but it's about picking your audience. Sometimes it's not worth addressing people calling you a white knight online and just getting on with the point you're trying to make. But also be mindful. I can't remember the theorician that did it, but there's a study that has been done that people really actually, will consider a room to be female dominated, even if it's 1/3 female. There is this huge perception problem where if a woman speaks 20% of the time, it's fucking chatterbox. So be mindful of your own contribution to that conversation, and be mindful that you aren't talking over anyone and you're not making it all about you. And if you are genuinely there to be an ally, good for you. Be proud of yourself and be aware of yourself, and try to ignore the trolls.
And ask, if you're, don't take offense on behalf of somebody. Just ask that person, what's going on? Is everything okay? One of the worst things that people have told me that can happen is when you start engaging trolls online, but you keep the original person being harassed in your mentions.
Yes,
and then
don't do that.
You drag it along with them, and it's just the real labor or genuine labor from that, not to belittle anyone's efforts, but it's if you actually feel offended about this behavior, and whether you're calling people out or calling them in, it's to be able to take that load off the person being harassed or attacked or whatever's going on. And a lot of that comes from asking people, how they would like to be either, to be supported, basically. It's an issue of consent. So don't do the behaviour that would be essentially stepping in front of someone else and talking over them and standing up for them and taking away their agency. Just ask people, ask what their consent is, what their levels of consent is.
And if you are away from someone else, then I would say to just have a sense, and it will take a while, of your own values, of what you will stand for and what you won't, and work with that. That's what this is what you will tolerate. It's got nothing to do with anyone else. So I won't tolerate certain behaviours towards women and certain phrases towards women, certain phrases towards men. And that is my issue, not anyone else's. A lot of you, and I apologize, have sent us questions about trans men and trans masculine people, and how, even with the very words we're using here, we might be excluding non-binary. That is a huge question on all sorts of issues. I don't want to leave you. I want to jump in, or should I? Is that too much pressure?
What was the question?
The question is, there's lots of them. Let me see if I can find one way to sum them up. How can we explore the language of deconstruction of masculinity, erasing non-binary and trans-masculine identity? Are the very words we're using here to talk about the problem, in fact, not acknowledging other people with other kind of gender identities?
I'm sorry, it's past 5, so my brain is operating at a very slow pace.
Yeah.
But from my understanding is that how do we change the semantics of language to be more accepting of not only trans-masculine but also non-binary?
Yeah, are we leaving people out in this conversation, and how do we not leave them out?
Jen?
Sorry, I was just going to say that question sounds more like, it sounds more like it's not about you. If you're not the person they're talking about who's being the white knight, who's being the person who's doing all that stuff, then it's really not an issue with you know what I mean? Like you're not the person doing it, but you're trans-masculine or anything like that. Yes, there is some sort of responsibility not to become like that, but you're not the one who's originally perpetuating it either, unless you are the person who's going around and saying that.
A good rule of thumb is to not co-opt people's pain. If they are offended, if people do something relatively offensive and so the person targeted by it, has wanted to hands-on approach to it, that isn't a free call to arms for you. Like, it isn't a call to arms to, okay, well, they can't handle this pressure, I will take up the sword and fight off these nasty sexists. No. If you do value, humanizing each part of the LGBTQIA, you will always prioritize their feelings first, never make it into yours. And yes, you may have issues, and I might be thinking a little bit within the context of Twitter, because sometimes I'll see it happen a lot, where someone will say a statement, the usual trolls and or anti-fems or whatever will jump in on it, and the person will have gone deadly quiet because for whatever reason they've abandoned Twitter, they can't handle the pressure, whatever the reason, and suddenly their slew of followers, or may not even be their followers, they'll suddenly take up arms and make this their battle, and and like sort of Steve sort of addressed, they would perpetuate this entire, feeding into this poor person's emotional welfare, and it's like you have to know when to stop and maybe consider asking the person if they're okay with it. So again, I may or may not be missing the question here because I'm not comprehending quite well. But yeah, if it's not your battle, just don't co-opt people's pain, and maybe ask, and just prioritize that person, the person who's being targeted, above yours.
There is a question that sort of leads into the other side of that, is trans men and non-binary people who use toxic masculinity to pass or to fit in or to define themselves better, and thoughts on that. My general thought is if you're using something toxic as a way to express your identity, then it's not okay. There's no reason that anyone's identity needs to be expressed in a way that is toxic to other people or society. And there's no reason to express masculinity in a toxic way. Get out of my genre, get out of my gender if you think that's the truth.
But I feel like it's very much on cis people to take up that mantle and present examples of masculinity that may not be that toxic masculinity, because I feel like trans lives are often in danger if they can't pass.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I totally understand using that, because sometimes it's just easier for me to adopt that language in a conversation, let alone someone who's literally...
it's easy for me.
So it's kind of up to the cis to make it safer for trans men not to have to adopt that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But but like, as non-binary, as say trans-masculine people would, I think, if you yourself feel in danger by this masculinity, I think maybe pick your friends better. It's a weird and cruel thing to say, but if that is the sort of environment that your friend circle, or even a singular friend, I can only hope just one person, keeps perpetuating that kind of toxicity and that kind of harmfulness, then maybe it's a good time to consider how much you value this person's existence in your life, because it comes down to the very, line of it, you do you be your best, don't let anyone stop you do that. And if someone is making you feel afraid for who you are, and afraid of, and even questioning your gender to the point that you have to partake in toxicity, in partaking in shitty language, and in, putting down others just to feel, or at least, perform the masculinity that these others, expect of you, then maybe it's about time to maybe take a step back and consider the value of these people's existence in your life.
One of the terrible things about being young for younger is you have less choice in that regard. I mean, you are trapped in some of these situations where your friends are basically the people who beat you up the least or just got grouped with you and you have to stay with them because anywhere else is survival. So there's absolutely a huge issue about you're swimming in a toxic culture. There is no shame in adopting that culture to stay alive and safe.
Do what you can to stay alive, to stay safe, and it's easier said than done to just say, oh, cut off all those shitty friends and make new ones. Because as an introvert and honestly self-professed hermit, it's a little hard to make friends when all you have is a Skype and or Discord group. And you know what? You start small. Make those friends that make you feel better about yourself. And for all intents and purposes, if you need to keep performing that toxic masculinity, try not to police what you can, but put your safety above all else. Your mental welfare and everything. And there's been a couple panels today about that too. So just, yeah, it's a little hard to survive as non-binary or even trans. You know, so at this point, I always value safety and one's mental welfare above other things. So.
Question there. Oh, sorry, go.
I was just going to say, you can't change the culture if you're not here. So pick your battles and self-care comes first.
Speaking of changing the culture and something you said earlier about masculinity, I think sometimes once you've started going down this path of examining it a lot, I know I personally start to feel ashamed of a lot of toxic masculine culture, and I start to blend into I blend right into being ashamed of masculinity in general. So my question to you guys would be, can you think of things that are masculine traits that are positive? Just try and end on a more positive note.
That's a very good question. Oh, sorry. Sarah's response. It's a very good question. The problem I have with it is that it's always going to get loaded because my masculinity is not going to be somebody else's masculinity. And for me, one of the things that freed me up and made me go, yeah, actually I like being masculine and I am masculine, which took me a long time to actually get comfortable with because of my background growing up, was going, well, I'm going to decide what that means. So for me, a masculine trait is caring. A masculine trait is being gentle. But there's also, there are more traditional ones like being relied on, being emotionally strong. So that's, for me, some of those things, and that would be traditionally female, that I can sort of say, no, these are actually part of my masculinity. So that's sort of, I know that's kind of a cop-out answer to, but that's how I approach this question. I figure out, I believe these things do not belong to the feminine mystique. And I express my masculinity through some of these nesting and caring and gentle qualities. And I'll punch anyone in the face who says they aren't masculine.
I was going to say that it's very similar in the tone that when you define traits as being masculine or feminine, that there's some mutual exclusivity that is implicitly kind of there. And it's very important to define yourself. So I think one of the things is, for example, just being confident with how you define who you are. And this whole idea of being ashamed is, I would say that comes alongside of just recognizing what is happening. But the biggest kind of guilt that we would feel in that regard, possibly, in my experience anyway, is inaction and not doing something to change it. And I think that when you start making positive steps, especially about even questioning your own identity and how you define yourself as masculine or feminine or whichever traits you identify with, those are really healthy and positive steps. Things like empathy, things like being mindful, for example. Like I know that some of us can appear to be not very approachable people, and just being friendly and being mindful and being like these are traits, for example, that I can define as being healthy masculine. In that I have a beard, long hair, I look like I crawled out of the woods, and yet I like to feel as though that I'm very considerate and well-mannered and respectful to people around me, and that's a very healthy trait to have. But that's not like a masculine trait. It just aligns with my character and personality and how I define myself as well. and being confident about that is very important.
For me, a lot of the masculinity, femininity, and all that tends to sort of lose a bit of meaning personally, because again, as I've said, I am non-binary. I think it's a little unfair to start attributing traits to any one or the other. If you feel masculine, then you are. You don't have to conform any way or say things or, you know, partake in any particular hobbies to identify as masculine. If you are masculine, if you feel masculine, then you are masculine. So, you know, to sort of say, attribute like very abstract traits to, oh, you're very energetic, or you're a very, you know, you're a go-getter, or you're a, you know, very enthusiastic. You're very strong, you're very stoic, you know, and it's very gender-coded words already, and we don't, that sort of contributes to a more larger sort of conversation needs to happen with regards to gender in general, gender roles. So I feel, just personally for me, if you feel masculine, then you are masculine. There is no need to assign traits to it.
It's a lovely note, Jenna. Was there any other questions? We're running right out of time. I'll be here to answer some more questions. You've got our my Twitter details, except it's gone.
They're no secret.
Yeah. As I said at the start, I'm very much interested in taking this project further and working to fix masculinity on a larger scale. And that's one of the things if you ever feel guilty, a small act of reparation is the best cure for a bit of guilt. Just do something good and pay it forward. So I'm very, very interested in what you guys want to know and what you guys see as ways to go forward. So please talk to me online. You can keep answering the survey. You can get me on Twitter, and I'm sure you can talk to the other guys as well. And come up and talk to us after as well. Anything else you guys want to add at the end there?
Thanks for having us, guys.
Yeah.
We had a
And
really
thanks for
great
coming.
Saturday.